About to leave, already packing. Come with me, I'm not really asking. We'll get away to a place where we don't know. About to see the world in action, what we can be, life with no distractions. We'll get away, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free with me. Let's go, let's be free with me. Be free. Not looking back, eyes on the freeway, Bonnie and Clyde, a classic cliche. We're on the run, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free.
Good afternoon. Hi,
Yep.
Craig. How are you doing? You all right? I had to quickly remind
I'm
myself
good,
what
thanks,
time it was
Duncan.
then.
It is afternoon. We're a bit earlier today, aren't we?
It is quite nice doing it, not at tea time.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for joining us, everyone who has. We're going to be doing 30 to 40 minutes on media now, so we're going to have a range of activities. If you've joined us before, you'll know the kind of thing. If you haven't, there are opportunities to get involved in the chat window, check your knowledge, and also look at some of the skills a little bit as well. We will also keep an eye on that chat window if you've got questions for us as we go, whether it's about some of the content, if we mention a concept or a name or something that you weren't familiar with. Hopefully we'll pick it up as we go, but we'll keep an eye out for your questions. But also, I've seen you're already starting talking to each other in the chat window about things like when you don't need introductions and things like that. We'll keep an eye out on that kind of thing as well. Okay. All right. I can see from a few of the comments in the chat window, and the same was happening, the other day when we were doing beliefs. Quite a few people saying they're a bit nervous about paper 2. This feels like a lot of content, that kind of thing. So just, if you've got any questions, do ask them. I do feel like, there is a lot, and I can understand why people worry about it. But you haven't got any 30 markers. It is a little bit more contained what you're going to write. And
minimal research methods.
We haven't got the research methods or the methods in context or theory. Obviously got.
I say minimal because obviously some media.
You might mention some. You might mention some research
methodology in media
in relation to the topic. You might do. Yeah, and it's just been kind of savvy a bit with the skills with some of those 10 markers in particular. They have the different types of 10 markers. Could the representations come up for the third time on the 20 marker, or is it unlikely? Could do. You know, what we'd always say is that
Yeah.
any topic could come up for any question. You know, it's you know, it makes sense to have a look at what's been asked before and think, oh well, maybe that, you know, but you know, as you said, could it come up for the third time? You know, people might have been saying before, maybe it's unlikely to come up this time because it came up before. It did, so it could come up again. Similarly, like almost every 10 mark has been about the new media. You know, could it be new media again? Yeah, it could be. And obviously with the representations, there are quite a few different groups. Jake's just mentioned disabilities not being asked about previously. You know, there are different groups that they could ask about. So even if it's not the same, you know, gender or whatever, they could ask about another group, for example.
And I always think it's useful to think about representations and new media, because that's a nice kind of, that's one of the ways in sort of which those questions can be asked is how has new media changed these representations, because that can be quite tricky, because a lot of the stuff that we've looked at in media can be seen to be a little bit dated because it focuses on traditional media. So a way that they could ask it is by asking how has new media changed those representations. So it's really worthwhile having a look and coming up with a couple of ways in which representations of different groups have been changed through new media. When you do your revision, just kind of note those down so that you might be prepped for something like that if it came up as a 10
A
or even a
couple more.
20, because you can use it as
Yeah,
evaluation.
you could
20.
absolutely. A couple more questions have come up about sort of technique type stuff. I've favourited them, so we can come back to them later. So we're not ignoring them, but we'll get onto the activities, and then I'll, when we come back, I might try and address a couple of those technique questions. Okay, but let's do a few activities first. So we're starting in the traditional fashion with Craig and a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
That's right. We like to keep the format very similar at this time of year, so we're not shocking anyone. I think a lot of what we do at the moment is about building your confidence before this exam in a couple of days' time. So if you haven't watched one of our things before, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is where we give you 2 minutes and we ask you to identify 5 is something, 4 is something, 3 is something, 2 is something, and 1 of something. They are on the screen there. We're looking for 5 models of media, you know, impacts media models on the audience, 4 features of new media. All right, 3 news values, 2 theoretical views of media, 2 of the kind of big theories that we talk about in terms of media generally, and 1 criticism of new media. Let's go with our 2 minutes.
5, 4, 3, 2.
A few comments coming in there, sort of like people are a little bit kind of worried. Can you get 8 to 10 marks without mentioning any specific sociologists? Yes, theoretically you can.
Theoretically you could. I've favourited these ones, yeah. Oh, we got some answers going in there from N,
Okay,
from Lucy.
cool. Hypodermic syringe. Yeah, hypodermic syringe, cultural effect model, reception model, 2-step flow. 2-step gratification. I think it's uses and gratification.
2-step flow,
model.
use and gratification.
Excellent. Yeah, the drip model. Sometimes, sometimes also known as cultural effects model. Sometimes it is used to refer to as the drip model. Hypodermic. They're all coming through quick now. Convergence, interactivity, accessibility, user power from Grace. That's obviously for features and new media. Good. Demi Lee, hypodermic syringe. It's gone very quickly there. Hannah, hypodermic syringe model, selective filter model. Excellent. Reception analysis, cultural effects model, uses and gratifications model. Excellent. Tomi, features new media, citizen journalism, dialogical, and interactive. Excellent. May's come up with digitization, choice, hypertextuality, and convergence for features of new media. Excellent.
Yeah, Sophie went with interconnectivity and hyper reality.
Jake, I'm assuming this is news values, extraordinariness, bad news equals good news, celebrities. Yes, excellent. With news values, there's lots of different kind of people who talk about news values. We often sort of like kind of go to Galtung and Rouge. And it is Galtung and Rouge, isn't it? I always get Rouge and Rune confused. But there's also like Lee and Kirkup. There's others who sort of like have talked about it as well.
1.
Okay, negativity, personalization, elite nations, excellent. Obviously, again, use values, theoretical views of media, neophiliacs and cultural pessimists. Yeah, definitely start like with new media. Sophie, Curran and Seaton, the new media isn't new, it is just different. Nice use of Curran and Seaton there. New media can be seen as ageist.
Oh, because we're like a sort of digital
It can be.
divide. Yeah.
Yeah, digital divide. Let's see some of the other ones. Media saturation and hyperreality, theoretical. Let's wonder what that one's gone into. Or maybe is that
Theoretical views of the media. Yeah. Theoretical views of the media.
Theoretical views of the media, yeah. Certainly those two sort of link into kind of a postmodern view.
Yeah.
The kind of concepts like the postmodern view there. Charmaine, hypodermic syringe model. Let's have a look at ours. Oh, new media can contain journalism. Yes, it can.
Yes. Yeah.
And I would certainly say new media has probably increased that because of the, kind of, and that links into ownership as well, because sort of what you have is ownership kind of cutting costs and producing the same content for various local newspapers and things like that. Journalism, just to talk about that, it's kind of the way in which there are almost preset stories now that come out. It's not quality journalism. It's seen as being the same story, just with a different angle. It's almost sometimes you can see it with like things like clickbait information.
Yeah.
It's just
the term's been used.
It's not quality journalism.
No, the term's been used slightly differently by at different times. So when it was first being talked about journalism, the context was about kind of political spin doctors putting out a press release, and then the government, and then the newspapers just basically reprinting that without being critical of it, just basically sort of just churning the press release. It's often used now also for things like, you see these articles where they basically just post what people have been tweeting. You see those ones quite a lot online. It's like, has anyone really written this article? It's just like, oh well, Bruce Springsteen said this, and then Donald Trump said that, or whatever. And really they're just churning stuff that they've found online.
Yeah. And you'll see it in many kind of, particularly online media. It's certainly more present on online media, where sort of like you just see the same story almost with a couple of words changed here and there from different sources. So it's just this kind of idea that it's not becoming unique. It is. I mean, it's just churned out. Is possibly the best way to explain it.
Now we've got these
Okay,
nice
so let's look at our models.
Here. I'm just going to.
Yes,
I was just going to say, because we had a couple of questions about them. I was going to leave them till later, but I'll just bring them now because we've got them. So someone asked, do we need to know all of them because there's so many? Someone asked, do we need to know the sociologists attached to them? And someone asked, how many would you need in a 20 marker? So they're all kind of related. So I thought if we just briefly touch on, say you got a question about this, what would you go?
Mm-hmm. I think what you're looking at there is the main distinctions you need to know is kind of between like kind of active and passive audiences. That's the main kind of thing. Is are the audience just receiving information and just they're not doing anything with it? So for things like cultural effects model and hypodermic syringe model, they would be seen as being kind of passive models of media, where sort of like just they're being pumped with information and nothing really happens with it. They just accept it. Then you have kind of the active kind of media models where somebody has to do something with it. I've just realised I've got a typo in reception analysis.
Sorry, I missed that as well.
No, that's all right. And then you have models where sort of like something, the audience will do something with that information, whether it is rejecting it, or whether it is kind of opposing it, or whether it is being transmitted through a third person. So, for example, the selective filter model, for example, you either choose what media source you need, you then sort of like choose how you react to that media. So what I would say is know a range of them. I would maybe know sort of like a couple of active, couple of passive. I think if you were to get a question on it, they will probably, if you got a 20 marker on it, they would hint at a couple in that in the item, and you may want to bring in a third or fourth.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'd say roughly about 4.
Yeah,
And what
and
else?
if you think
What was the
about
other
it,
part of the question?
do you need to say who said them? And if you, I think what I would always say is if you
Not
know and if you
not
can
particularly.
remember,
If you do,
yeah, go for it. Yeah, all knowledge is good, but knowing
yeah,
the concept and understanding it is more important than remembering who said it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was
and I
just
can see some people sort of putting like Katz and Lazarsfeld in
yeah,
there, sort of like
great stuff.
Clapper, cultural effects models, so they can kind of link into kind of your um oh, the names just completely escaped me.
Who are you trying to
Frankfurt
remember?
School and things like that. You can look at and beyond. I don't know if they're
Yeah,
cultural effects. It was Frankfurt School, and then it was anyway. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, often
reception
link it with like the
analysis,
Glasgow.
for instance,
Yeah, yeah. Hall you could link it with
Glasgow
also.
University Media
Yeah,
Group.
Glasgow University Media Group,
Oh
Phelan,
yeah,
and people like that.
encoding.
Yeah. And that's the thing
Yeah,
is that some of these
there's
are
lots
very
of
much associated with one person, but a lot of them are. Several sociologists have talked about this, so you don't need to like sort of. This was definitely just this one person who wrote about this. It's cultural
yeah.
effects model is a kind of
And
neo-Marxist kind of approach, and so
yeah,
relevant to lots of those people.
yeah, and you can
Marcuse
also
as well,
sort of
don't you?
see. So yeah, Marcuse. That's who he was thinking with the Frankfurt School.
Yeah,
Marcuse, Horkheimer,
yeah,
Adorno. I'm going
yeah. You
through
can
all
you
of
can
that
link it with
Frankfurt
all of
School now.
those
So,
sort of.
um, but also sort of you can see things people like Hall did go on with it, kind of encoding, decoding model, and things like that as well, which is not always kind of covered. The kind of
No.
Hall's encoding, decoded in some other ones.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Right.
So we've got those our 5 models there. Let's go to
Yeah.
number 4. Participatory culture, revitalizing democracy, technological convergence, digitalization. There were lots of others
Yeah.
that
Some good ones on there.
other people came up with, which I'm kind of forgetting now. People asking what the Frankfurt School is. It was a Frankfurt School of kind of sociology, kind of developed in the 1930s and then went back in the 1950s. And it was very much kind of a Marxist, but a humanistic kind of neo-Marxist view
neo-Marxist.
rather than traditional Marxist view. And the phrase Frankfurt School was given to the particular school, which contained people like Adorno, Marcuse, Horkheimer. I'm trying to think of others that are in there. But yeah, it is a Marxist view. So,
Yeah,
okay,
interactivity.
that's 3.
Interactivity B, yeah, absolutely. That would be a
Yes,
feature
it would
of the
be.
new media as well. Yeah, very good. Participatory culture.
I did see.
Someone was asking what do we mean by participatory culture. Oh, and B might have been answering with the interactivity because that is kind of what we're talking about. People getting involved. Yeah. Anything you'd add to that?
Yeah.
Sorry, Craig, I talked over you.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. Participatory culture. I mean, what I've seen, sort of like some people ask about these kind of different features of new media is how many do I need to know? I would say, again, think about 4 or 5. If you get a 10 marker, it might highlight, if you get a 10 marker apply and analyze type question, it might highlight specific features of the new media and you'd be able to kind of develop those if you've got response. So it might be apply and analyze 2 ways in which new media has transformed something, has transformed our experience, for example, and they may hint at a couple of kind of features of new media that you could then develop. But there are quite a lot of different features of new media, and sometimes the terms aren't always the same across textbooks. So it would be really useful to have a good idea of what new media has done.
Sam asked, is citizen journalism a feature of new media? Yeah, absolutely. It could be something that you could. It's certainly characteristic of the new media. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of more of a product, isn't it? Really,
Yeah.
It's kind of a product of that participatory culture and the interactivity, and it's kind of a product of that. But it would certainly be useful as an example of the way in which the new media has changed. For example, you could use it in ways in which new media has changed news value. For example, you could say, well, actually, now we're getting more citizen journalism, so on and so forth. Number 3, sensationalism, elite nations and people proximity. There are so many kind of different news values. Again, it's useful to know a range of them. Enough to be able to kind of do a 20 mark essay. I don't think you would be expected to know every news value that's ever been written down by any of those. Sensationalism is this idea that sort of like that it would be news headlines that really grab the attention and get people to purchase the media or view the media, because obviously media is very much driven by advertising revenue. So they will focus on sensational stories. Elite nations and people, this is why we tend to focus on I would say sort of probably Western nations rather than the rest of the world, and also why we tend to focus more on celebrity lifestyle. Again, the kind of background to that is people are more likely to be engaged in that type of thing. And proximity looks at the idea of sort of like that we are more likely to hear about news that is in close proximity to us. So this is one of the reasons why the news media is often seen as being Eurocentric, because obviously that's in close proximity to us.
Yeah.
There are lots of other news values that people have come through.
Yeah. I was just going to say with the elite nations and with the proximity one, often like if people are reporting a disaster somewhere in the world, they'll often tell you how many British casualties there've been. That, for example, it's that hook, that local hook, isn't it, into the story. What other news values are there? Loads of them. We've got a nice list from Galtung and Rouge, just like the sort of kind of the original set of news values, and then others have added some others along the way afterwards. You'll sometimes see them different terms using to describe the same thing. So like extraordinary enough is similar to the kind of sensationalism, or is it continuity? There's lots of them, aren't there? Is it a continuing story that you can already tell? Simplicity, there's lots of different things that might impact whether something gets reported or not. Whether that is news or not. It's the idea that the news is socially constructed.
Yeah. I've not seen the one that Lucy's talking about. Look up Galtung and Rouge 10-cent cup fee. I've not seen that, but I have seen on Galtung's own webpage, there's a really nice kind of, it's almost like a cartoon of sort of like all of the different news values that they initially did and when they revisited it, and there's kind of like pictures to demonstrate them. I think there's about 12 on there, and it's really useful if you actually go to Johan Galtung's own web page. They're up there.
Oh, right.
It's a really useful kind of mnemonic.
Yeah, I'm just seeing the 10-cent cup fee is a mnemonic, so it's things like you can use them to. I can't make it work, but things like continuity threshold, it's the letters come in there. So
I see.
Yeah,
that's a nice mnemonic.
Yeah, it's good.
I'll have to look at that. That's a good mnemonic. Good mnemonic. Thank you, Lucy. We've learned something today.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so let's go to number 2. Are pluralists, are Marxists? Of course, you can talk about postmodernists as well, and you can, there's other theories that would come in that you could perhaps apply to media, but these are generally the main ones that you would look at as pluralism, postmodernism, and Marxism. It's on the Tutor to You Knowledge Organiser.
No,
I don't think
it's
it
not
is.
apparently. No, it's on there. It's on the Hectic Teacher one. Yeah, okay, that's great. Thank you. No, that's all right.
I was going to say,
we ought to have heard of it then, oughtn't we?
I wrote the Knowledge Organiser, so I should have heard of it if I wrote it. No, the Hectic Teacher, yeah, she does have some really good mnemonics. Sorry. Okay, number 1. I'm trying to remember what question number 1 was now. I've kind of got thrown a little bit. It was criticism of the new media, wasn't it? And dumbing down of information. Some people mentioned other things. Is the new media really new? Did we have participatory culture in the past in terms of sort of like letters pages and the way in which people would write into programs like Points of View? I don't even think that even exists. It hasn't existed for a long time now. And obviously sort of like democracy, revitalizing democracy, sort of like the media has often done that in different ways. It can be unregulated, yes, Fahima, that's a really good point as well. We're seeing a lot of that at the moment, sort of like this idea of unregulated new media and how it can then promote things like fake news and so on and so forth.
So you've got all the sort of cultural pessimist type ideas, haven't you?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to have a little bit of a debate now. It's going to have a couple of bits. Well, ownership and control will come under the microscope a little bit now, but just the general point to begin with. I think whether the media is owned and controlled by the ruling class. Now, I suppose that's immediately making us think Marxism, but I'm happy for you to come up with the odd more. Is it owned and controlled by the patriarchy as well? We can go with either approach, but I'm going with the ruling class here. So we'll start with the side of the argument that it is. Okay, can you give me some arguments or some evidence or some ideas that would suggest that the media is owned and controlled? And obviously ownership and control, we want to tease out the differences of those in this sort of debate, by the ruling class. Any thoughts?
I'm just seeing Megan's point there, sort of like about do we talk about Harkup and O'Neill's views? Yeah, Harkup and O'Neill sort of like is a more contemporary version of news values,
Yeah, great
kind
stuff.
of updated Galtung and Runes. So you could use that as well. As I said, there are a number of different
Yeah,
sociologists who talk about it.
yeah. And
News
don't
values.
worry if you've used one and not another and all that kind of thing. Okay, we've got reinforces capitalist ideas. We've got the majority of media professionals and journalists are coming from the middle class backgrounds. We've got Curran and Seaton, so that four
Some
men
nice
own the British
examples.
media, media moguls controlling it, conglomerations. 3 companies own 90% of newspaper circulation. Currents, just that owners directly manipulate the media. Western domination, globalization, dominant ideologies, neo-Marxists and the GOMG, editors being
There's a
middle
lot.
class. Yeah, owned by very few
Um,
media. Oh, you know your stuff on this. Bagdickian.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, own all these news platforms. Even with new media, they're owned by these media moguls. Half the world's media is owned by 4 men. Yeah, the ruling class run the media, but the journalists have the same values, and they're likely to be white middle class men with conservative values. These are very good points. You're all doing a good job there. You can link that with as well as Bagdickian and various other people who put there. Owen Jones right about that with his in the establishment. Ideological state apparatus, Gramsci, hypodermic syringe model, Miliband and the dominant ideology. Oh, wow, brilliant. 51% of journalists are privately educated compared with 7% of the population. Chomsky, structural factors mean the media is used for the interests of the powerful. Ah, you know this. You're doing very
I
well.
like I like the way that sort of like there are the kind of different concepts, sorry, different ideas being pushed forward on this. It shows that sort of like not all teachers teach exactly the same, and
Yeah.
not all textbooks focus on exactly the same, which is really useful.
Yeah, could you talk about bread and circus? Yeah, you absolutely can. The idea that
Yep.
the media is kind of distracting the workers from their exploitation. All right, people are starting to do the other side now with pluralists. We'll come to that in a second. But yeah, we've got Alfies, we've got Marquise, we've got lots and lots of really good stuff there. You've done far better, far more interesting than mine. We've got a small number of media moguls. Own most of the print media, for example, Murdoch. Well done. Lords of the Global Village, Sam. Yeah, very good. 7 large organisations control the media. Editors and senior journalists are also dominated by wealthy white men. And as other people have said, yeah, journalism is there's a almost we wouldn't call it a canteen culture necessarily, would we? But you have a kind of workplace culture of journalism as well, which might be quite conservative. Okay, what about the flip side of the argument then? Yes, Jay, you could use the GOMG. You could, loads of good responses again there. Okay, Megan, pluralists would argue that media is a business and produces content that reflects audiences' needs, not of the ruling class. Yeah, so this is us starting to separate ownership from control, isn't it? Just because people, rich
I
business
like
owners own big businesses, that's just inevitably, isn't it? But they don't necessarily control the content. Maybe the audience controls the content. Oh, we got
there's a
those
point
here.
there's a point there by Sophie about sort of like groups like Led by Donkeys. I think it's a really good one as well.
Yeah.
Citizen journalism, how there can be sort of like journalistic or there can be groups that sort of like represent different viewpoints and linked into kind of the pluralist perspective. That was a good one. Lots of other people come up with citizen journalism, gives people greater
Yeah.
choice. That's from
Isabella's
Jake.
talked about audience control and giving the example of people in Liverpool not buying the Sun. We've got McQuail. Audience use the media how they want and choose what they want to see. Owners have a lack of control. James Whale. We still don't know if that's the
The radio presenter.
The radio presenter. I don't think so. Media is audience and demand led. The free market leads what we have. Citizen journalism. Supply and demand. Audiences rule. Participatory culture. Jenkins. Provides consumers with more choice. Loads and loads here. Really good.
I like that one. Audiences are active and mainly use it as a background wallpaper. That's quite a nice point.
Yeah. Journalists start to use different data. Not all media platforms are privately owned, so some are run by the public, maybe, yeah, like public broadcasting companies, it's corporations like the BBC. Postmodernists say there's no longer a dominant ideology from the ruling class. So,
Excellent.
yeah, fantastic. Okay, loads and loads of really good ideas there. Again, far more interesting than what I will have put. The owners don't have the time or inclination to control the content. They just want to sell their papers. Although that's sometimes used to say, but having said that, the journalists and the editors have the same views anyway. So, you can use that one on either side of the argument. But then the pluralism one and the postmodernism one's excellent. The audiences control the media, especially the new media. And Grace has said there about media saturation makes it impossible for individuals to control media output. There's just so much media and so much choice. Although, of course, we can start to, is there like a fallacy of choice? Does it seem like there's lots of choice, but really, because of journalism and various other things, really, we just got lots of variations of the same thing. Okay. Really good. Some really good responses to that, weren't there? With your ownership and control heads on, got Craig going to look at this a bit further.
We are. What we're looking at here is the media ownership on different representations of groups. So I mentioned at the very start of this kind of thing that you might want to look at things like how new media impacts on different representations. In this one, I'm looking at how the ownership of the media, particularly given what we've just discussed there, how might the ownership of the new media impact on the representations of different groups and ideas? So we've put here conflict. So the idea is that there is conflict in society, or the idea of inequalities broadly in there. Gender, social class, ethnicity, age, and disability. We're going to give it a spin and see how the impacts of media ownership might impact on the representations of these different groups. So let's give it a spin. Things go round and round and round.
Oh, just
social class. So, knowing what we know about media ownership, how might that impact on the way in which different social classes are represented? So, knowing what we know about media ownership, which we've just discussed in the last one, how might it then impact on the way in which different social classes are represented? So, how might the working class be represented? The middle class, the upper class, so the elites, even the underclass, how might they be represented in the media? Josana's put in working class represented as a problem. Yes, they certainly are. So why would we link that to media? Jake's come up with a good one. Media professionals and journalists are mostly middle class, so news, values, ideology may favour middle class views. Then what we would do is, how does that then influence the representations of the middle class? Sophie, reported on Princess Charlotte, speaking multiple languages, portrays the upper class and the owners as intelligent. Oh, sorry, it's just gone back. There it is. It's still there. Whereas underclass and immigrants, unintelligent and simple. Okay, excellent. So you've made that link kind of into the representations there. Working class is seen as a source of trouble and conflict. Excellent. Georgie Cunningham was labelled as a scrounger by the upper class media for getting a free breast implant on the NHS. I don't particularly know that story, but I know that there are similar stories to that to those. And there are lots of stories about that. Particularly from kind of, and it certainly happens in new media as well. Go on.
Yeah, I just said a few people are using the term symbolic annihilation. We've got Tina Panbali and TVK talking about working class being symbolically annihilated, and then Jake and Megan have both talked about Owen Jones and the demonisation of the working class, the Chav study.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, that's the route that's quite good to go down. The term symbolic annihilation is a really, really useful one to know, because you can use it across several different groups. This concept of that people are misrepresented or underrepresented within the media is seen as symbolic annihilation. I think it first used is it Tushman et al. You first use it for women, but it's also used for ethnic minority groups and can be used in disability as well.
A few people
working
have
class
mentioned
as tasteless.
Oh yeah. Yeah, don't finish that.
Working class portrayed as tasteless, and a dominant ideology reflects middle class norms and values. Excellent. Yeah. So it's
I really like
looking
one
down on the class.
I really like one from N. Was the middle class depicted as the default audience?
Yeah,
and it could be argued that this is also done as an illusion to promote consumerism. I think that's a really good point.
Nice.
Because we often, one thing we say is that obviously middle class and upper middle class kind of represent themselves as the norm in the media because that's what they know and that's who they are, and the working class are presented as other in these various ways. Either they're not presented at all, they're symbolically annihilated, or they're kind of demonized or made to seem a problem. But the other thing is, if you think about things like property programs and stuff like that, it's always no one ever, everyone's always got a very big budget to buy a very nice big house, haven't they, and all that kind of
Property
thing. And
programs,
the idea that
Same.
the idea that holiday programs as well and things like that, isn't it? It's always promoting a rather extravagant lifestyle.
I was just going to add to that with cookery programs, gardening programs, all of these programs that are kind of geared towards making us consume. They're always focused on kind of middle class values, middle class taste, middle class budgets, the whole lot. I completely agree. I like Sophie's point about kind of poverty porn reports on the working class from a white middle class male lens, treats them like animals in a zoo. It's called poverty porn. So things like Benefit Street and sort of like Banged Up Abroad and all these type of things where sort of like they focus on the behaviour of the working class as being abnormal, and that's obviously dictated by the owners of the media. Okay, let's see what we put. So there's some really good ideas there.
I was just going to say, Tina, nice point there about the media gaze being typically middle class and the hegemonic ideology. Anyway, excellent stuff. You're doing really well.
I went quite simple and stuff. Like I said, it maintains a ruling class ideology, stereotyping working class as being lazy or ignorant. And I think we see a lot of that in the media, and I think it's led to a lot of dissatisfaction in society generally. Let's go and spin and see another topic.
Yeah, let's hope it lands somewhere different.
Let's see what we're going to do that. Well, if it does land on something, if it lands on the same thing, we can always talk about the intersections. Gender. How might the ownership of the media impact on the way in which different genders are represented? We've already had a nice point about symbolic annihilation, and I think we could use that here.
We could.
How might those ownership? And I think it's certainly one particularly would look in terms of, you could look at the intersections of class and gender. The beauty myth from Woolf, I think, is a nice point. Just to expand on that, the way in which sort of like women are expected to achieve a certain standard of what is seen as being attractive, and this can be portrayed by both male and female ownership of the media. It does happen with both. Male gaze is a common one that's come up there. Lucy, Noah. I'm talking about the work of Laura Mulvey in the 1970s.
Daniel,
the male gaze. Oh, Daniel got it too. Yeah, Mulvey, the male gaze. Well done. And Fahim has also come through with the male gaze. It is a common one. Can we think about something, particularly when we talk about, there's something there. Sophie Newbold discussed language use. We're talking about women in sport. Maintains women as an underclass and below men. Yeah, we can certainly see that. I mean, there's still debate going on, despite the kind of progress in things like women's football. There's still a lot of debate going on about representations of women in sport, in football, and things like that. Bechdel test is another good example there. We need to link those. Remember, we need to link them to media ownership. So why might they do this? And also think about masculinity. How might masculinity be portrayed by media ownership? Metrosexuality and retributive masculinity. Excellent, Megan.
Yeah. Not many people have mentioned who is owning the media in these points. They're all really good points about representations of gender. I guess the point is that the media is largely owned and controlled by men, or are we making that case? And so therefore that's the reason for this.
Hegemonic masculinity. Yeah.
Toxic masculinity.
Excellent, Sam. Toxic masculinity. Yeah, you can see that. You can also see other aspects of masculinity being presented as well. Strong reinforcing gender types. Remember, it represented strong reinforcing gender types. Why might the ownership of the media do that? Gilmore, 3 stereotypes of men as the provider, protector, and impregnator. Ooh, that's a nice one. Help to maintain hegemonic masculinity. Excellent. Tunstall, it's only made by men for men. It's also not only made by men, but for men. Excellent. So there's kind of idea in there. But we can also talk, and I've linked it into journalists mainly men. I can also talk into sort of like, particularly if we think about in recent, I would say very recent times, sort of like how there has been a crisis of masculinity as well. I mean, you see all the media the media response to a program like Adolescence, and now it starts talking about the crisis of masculinity and sort of like how there's kind of a struggle for young boys. That's very much been a media story in
Yeah.
recent weeks, and of course, then there is the back counter to that to sort of like say, well, actually, there's the role of male influencers, and that's a very negative thing.
And that's the
And we can
media
think
too,
of
of course.
go on.
And obviously that's through the media, and and you could use
Ends just
adolescence as
said.
an example. Yeah, fantastic. And obviously that's
Yeah.
sometimes can be a bit of an intersectional thing as well, couldn't it? That could be gender and class intersecting, and
Yeah.
is that middle class owners having an idea about working class boys, possibly, so it's kind of the things. Yes, in the exam you could use adolescence as an example, and loads of really good points coming out. Really, really good.
Grace has come up with a nice point there. Media owned by middle-aged people who, media owned by middle-aged people who are likely to reinforce traditional gender stereotypes like hegemonic masculinity and expressive female roles. That's a really nice way of putting it on it. Media reports on the beauty myth and how women should spend on their clothes and makeup. The media owners are often benefiting from these as adverts, or they themselves own these women-targeted companies. Excellent, because you can also talk about kind of synergy between these media groups and how they own other products. Power of the Pink Pound. Yes, you could. I'm trying to see like how you would link that from media ownership into
gender.
Particularly
if it was about sexuality or sexual orientation, you could. But I'm not sure quite how you link it to ownership. Other than that, people are wanting to make money, and so the flip side to people are spreading ideology is that the representations are about what sells and stuff, and so there's things that you could. Various things you could link to that. Someone earlier on, it was a good point. Tina talked about McRobbie and how magazines and the media might sort of present feminist ideas, but on a very sort of surface kind of cultural level rather than on a structural kind of level. It kind of and that would sort of avoid dealing with the more difficult kind of, structural issues.
How the media may sort of like push forward feminist ideas about sort of like, and generally sort of like they tend to focus on the issues of middle class white women rather than the actual structural ideas, as you sort of like said. So it's not looking at sort of like how the different intersections of class, gender, and ethnicity sort of like intersect. It's basically focusing on the concerns of white middle class women, and therefore it's not challenging. And the media, they're quite happy to do that. They're quite happy to push forward that because I'm trying to word this properly. It's a way of kind of acknowledging that there is inequality in society without really damaging their own interests.
Yeah, and then Sophie's put a nice counter. Sophie's put a nice counter from a pluralist point of view that there are people, and she mentioned the actress Jamila Al-Jamil, who uses her fame and so her role at that, but she's on the media and things like Instagram and stuff for pushing a genuinely sort of feminist position and things. People are enjoying Angel, which is my dog's comments on this, which is fair enough. Okay, there we go.
Okay, let's look at our answers. I wrote Mid Crisis of Masculinity and also sort of the objectification of women and the beauty myth. But there's lots of good points that you put in there. Commodification is another good one. Could you mention the page 2?
I think page 3
example of, as an example for gender, you certainly could.
Yeah.
And certainly with kind of objectification.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so next on to everyone's favourite bit of all these things is globalization. Can we think, this is nice and general, this one, can you give me 4 ways that that globalization has impacted on the media? So it can be any aspect of the media. Can you give me 4 ways that globalization has impacted? Okay, let's see what you come up with. We've got 30 seconds, but we'll probably need a little bit longer to come up with 4 ways, but let's see how you do. You've been very good at these, so you probably come up with them nice and speedily. Cultural imperialism, Andy Zedzer. Cultural hybridization, hybrid identities, cultural homogenization. Oh, there's so much. Local culture being blurred with high cultural strenuity. Well done. Yeah, westernization of the media. Global village, Americanization, cultural imperialism. Yeah, wow. Candy floss culture. Ritzer. Journalism, citizen journalism, information hierarchy, increased communication, fragmented identities, globalization. UK news channels increasingly report on news involving other countries. Global village,
Western
diversity.
domination
Yeah,
there at the bottom.
yeah, the immediacy of information and
Immediacy. Yeah,
events.
that's a
That's a
good one.
good point. Yeah, more consumer
Increase
choice.
increase in technology.
Yeah, decline in local
Decline.
news, increase in global news. Okay, loads and loads of really good points. See what we came up with. Probably a lot of very similar ones, I'm sure. Increased economic, trade and political changes. That's absolutely right, N. Can you think how that then links to the media? You're very good. Yeah, lots of the technological ones. Blurring boundary between popular and high culture is really good. And I'm assuming, Jake, you're also answering Drisana's question about Strinati there, or you might be doing, because that is very much part of what Strinati talk about. Okay, so we've got Americanization, Westernization, which lots of you talked about, and you also talked about cultural imperialism and lots of related concepts to that. I've got cultural hybridity, which lots of you came up with, and you countered it nicely with cultural homogenization. Formation of a global culture, and this idea of a global popular culture, which you can link with the points people have been making about Strinati and other places. And a couple of people asking, what do I mean by the undermining of local or folk cultures? So the idea that maybe if you're ending up with a global popular culture, that you might lose. And there's, obviously it's disputed whether this happened, and someone mentioned globalization. You could have local cultures in some cases have been reinforced by under globalization, but it might be that some local cultures or folk cultures end up being replaced by global culture, whether
Global
that's
culture.
whether that's westernization, Americanization, or a more hybrid type culture. Either way, it might be that people stop doing some of the sort of local type customs and things that they used to do. There is a sort of flip side to that can be kind of sold globally. The example that used to be used, but it's a very old example now. I'm sure someone will come up with a more modern one. Was Riverdance. I don't know if people remember this. It was like an Irish dancing show that was on the Eurovision Song Contest actually as a sort of entertainment, and then became this massive international product essentially. That lots of people all around the world were watching traditional Irish dancing. And I'm sure there'll be more contemporary examples of that, of where something that's actually quite a local cultural idea gets spread.
Sophie's come up with one there. People may expect to see Hawaiian dances of the haka.
Yeah.
New Zealand, the Maori New Zealand haka.
Yeah, and actually, when you're visiting places and stuff, you might part of the selling of the place could be popular culture, folk culture. I think.
It's kind of part of that kind of Uri idea of the tourist gaze, isn't it? And sort of like how that's kind of going into culture and identity, though, not media. Sorry.
Yeah. Some of the nice things people are talking about, trying to linking economic globalization to things in the media. Some good ones there with things like Zoom and online learning and meetings in the workplace. Like that's new media being used to do business across national borders, and that's good examples of that. Following Spectre, the James Bond film, people travelled to Italy to see the Day of the Dead festivals, which didn't actually exist on that scale in Italy. Okay, yeah.
Hollywoodization.
No,
I see that kind of points at like where you're going along, and sort of like saying people doing things for Instagram and stuff like that. So they do they try to engage in local culture, but kind of engage in local culture and say, "Oh, I've done this in local culture," but it's done in a very westernized way. Yeah.
Yeah, and a couple
But
of
again,
people
we're kind of going into culture and identity rather than media.
Yeah, but it does link. A couple of people using the kind of criticisms of McDonaldization or the alternatives to McDonaldization to make that point. And again, it's a nice cultural identity point. But you could, in terms of whether there is a global culture, that is definitely relevant to media too. Yeah, people talk about brands and things. Obviously, what counts as media and what doesn't. I mean, in the world of the new media, so much is media, isn't it? So much of our cultural experience is media because of media saturation. Okay, I think we've got some MCQs to finish with.
Yeah. Just some quick multiple choice questions. We've got 5 of them. We'll look at them sort of like from a range, right from across the topic area. Some of them you'll know straight away. Some of them a bit more tricky. So according to the Glasgow University Media Group, media professionals are mostly from A, middle class backgrounds, B, ethnic minority backgrounds, C, working class backgrounds, D, religious backgrounds. And I can just see a stream of A's going up the screen. You are correct, of course. That's quite an easy one, isn't it?
Yeah. Nice start.
What is meant by agenda setting? The term that's often used: the media telling people what to think, the government setting media content, a list of TV shows shown each day, and the media deciding which topics are important.
Okay, got possibly a bit more of a mixed bag on this one, but
some people, yeah, there is a little bit of mixed bag.
But most people going with
D, and
well
D is correct. Obviously, it's not like sometimes people may get agenda setting thing. I thought that there'd actually be a bit of more of a split between A and D, that people might get it confused. But deciding which topics are important, well done. You're kind of spot on, knowing that it's actually what the media sets the agenda. You know, they set what we are discussing. They set what we are going to think is important, but they don't tell us what to think. Well, not an agenda setting. No. Question number 3. Arguably, yeah. Which of the following is a criticism of pluralist views on media ownership? A, they believe that owners directly control content. B, they ignore power structures in the media. C, they believe media reflects a range of views. And D, they ignore audience power. So which of the following is a criticism? Yeah.
Lots
of people going with B.
Well done.
Excellent, yes. B is correct. They do believe that all the other things happen, that the owners will directly control content, and that the audience helps them. But it's it is owners who pick that, but they pick it for a specific audience. And of course, they also think that in the name pluralism, it reflects a range of views. But they are often criticised for ignoring power structures. Question number 4.
Oh, I think we answered this.
What is symbolic annihilation? I think I did. I forgot that this question was on. And I think I answered it. When groups are underrepresented and misrepresented, when people refuse to consume media, when media exaggerates stereotypes, when people boycott media. Excellent. Most people coming through with A, and you are correct. Well I clearly need to make these a little bit harder. Although, you could sort of like say that our audience is just fantastic, and that's why they're doing so well. Excellent. And postmodernists argue that media today offers A, complete objectivity, B, total audience control, C, one dominant viewpoint, or D, a collapse of traditional representations. This one might be a little bit more tricky. Because you could argue more than one, I think. But see, lots of people are going for total audience control. Some people are coming up with D, collapse of traditional representations. I could see those two as both being relevant arguments, really. Do we really think it is total audience control? Have we completely got rid of traditional representations? Think about what postmodernists say about the way in which we perceive traditional things like class, gender, ethnicity, disability, age.
Yeah. So it was D that you were
going. The collapse of traditional representations. I could see why people were going with total audience control, but still, because there is certain amounts, sort of particularly within that postmodern viewpoint, that sometimes the audience is now a creator, and therefore sort of like they can create media. But the kind of one that's the best fit there sort of is a collapse of traditional representations, which is a general postmodern viewpoint anyway, the decline of meta narratives.
Yeah, so I think we are done. There were I favorited a few questions at the start, most of which I think we ended up going on to answer. But I'll just double check, and we'll really quickly do a couple of these. Should we evaluate within paragraphs or do separate evaluation points of the 20 markers? We'll never sort of say there's only one way to do things. Personally, I'd evaluate within your paragraphs. I mean, it may well be that you end up with some kind of evaluative paragraphs as well, but for the most part, I'd go make your point and then evaluate that point, because that's going to be that's going to tend to be more explicit evaluation, and that gets higher marks.
It is. You're making a judgment on the point that you've just made. That's what you're doing with evaluation. So ideally you would do it shortly, just after you've made that point.
Yeah. When do we evaluate on the 10 markers? Is it the first one or the second one? So apply and analyze with the item is the one where evaluation is mentioned in the mark scheme. So I'd always do a bit on your apply and analyze. You can get, it's analysis and or evaluation. So in theory, you can get 10 marks without evaluation, but I'd always stick some evaluation in the one with the item. The outline and explain, all the IA3 is coming from analysis. So, yeah, okay. Can you get 8 to 10 marks without mentioning any specifics? So actually, I think you answered that one, didn't you?
We answered that one, yeah.
Yeah, in theory, you can. You want some proper sociology to get into that top band. Now, that doesn't necessarily, naming someone isn't necessarily adding some proper sociology. Adding names, on its own isn't enough. So you want some sociological concepts, some nice sociological ideas in there that might involve people's names, but that's not the thing that will make the difference necessarily. I think we talked about how many models and all that kind of thing, and do we need to know the names of them? Do we need to know all the media models? We've had all those, yeah.
Yeah, there's a few questions just there. If you run out of time, would you say an introduction or a conclusion is more important to get in? Conclusion.
Conclusion now to, yeah, if you're running out of time, yeah.
Definitely a conclusion.
Yeah. Do we need specific...
That's for a 20.
Yeah. Don't bother with introductions or conclusions at all for 10 markers, but for your 20, yeah. Do we need specific sociologists, organisations for media? Well, you need some stuff in there. You need some sociology in there, if that's what you're asking. You can't just use kind of... If you just use kind of examples of what you've seen on the telly and what you've seen on the news and stuff, all of which is quite relevant, contemporary examples and stuff, that's going to remain not particularly sociological. Now, we always say the concepts and the ideas are more important than the names, but yeah, you want some, you want to bring in that you're aware that this sociological research has happened and these sociological concepts exist, not just it be kind of a general knowledge type responses. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's an example that's like when we talked about news values before, and people were asking, "Can we use this study? Can we use that study?" Yes, you can. I mean, the concept that's most important there is news values rather than who said it.
Yeah, and will there be a paper 2 warm up live? Yes, there will. Can we remember when this is? It's the night. I think it's the day before the exam. I will. It'll come up on your. Yeah, something like that. Next week there is one. We will. I haven't scheduled it yet. I might go straight away and schedule it now, and then it'll appear on the on the YouTube things. You can start asking your questions as soon as it appears scheduled. But yeah, we will have one. It won't be specific to just people who do media, so it's going to be more these sorts of technical type questions that can apply for whatever your optional topics are, but the chances are most of the questions content wise are likely to be families, beliefs or media, just because of what most people do. But I know some people here do culture and identity, and if you've got some questions about that, we'll answer them as well. Okay. Sorry, I know there are some more questions coming through, but hopefully we've answered the main ones. Okay. It was lovely to see you all. Thanks very much, Craig. We're going to get off now. And yeah, okay.
And we will see you the night before the exam if you are joining us.
Absolutely. Cheers. So hopefully see some of you at the paper 2 warm up. And yet there are more coming for crime and deviance and paper 3 and all that kind of thing as well later on. Yeah. Cheers, guys. Thank you very much. Bye.